Welcome back to another speaker's tip. Today, I want to go back into talking about actually speech delivery and how to put your speech together. And the simplicity of the message today is let your story do the work. And what I mean by that is that I see a lot of speakers, and I've been doing a lot of coaching the last couple of months because it's international speech competition time, and I get a lot of people sending me their speeches. They want reviews on that. I still and continuously see a lot of speakers do what I call narrate their story versus just telling your story. Now, the simplicity in this is that the story is here, and you're talking about the story. Narrating, by definition, is to add a comment to something. And you know that if you're watching a movie and there's a narrator, they're explaining what's happening. This happens a lot like in nature movies. They'll talk about, the otter builds its home and you're watching the otter swim in the water, and the otter picks twigs up and you're watching the otter pick twigs up. It's telling you about what you're watching. If you have a story and the speaker is now over here telling you the significance of the story, telling you why the story is important, and instead of allowing the story to tell you why it's important. The story's told well enough that it carries the message. Now, this is, to me, a mark of what I would say a relatively poor speaker to a relatively good speaker. This is a pretty big demarcation that happens. Poor speakers will narrate their stories all the time, and they'll tell you the significance of it. Now, just to drive this home a little bit, I have a couple paragraphs I pulled out of some of the speeches that I start with some people, and I've changed these quite a bit. So, and also they're from a couple of years ago. So nobody's going to, I think, recognize, oh, he's using my speech. But this is one of them. Someone said, actually, this was last year, and someone said, 2020 was a tough year for everyone. A year when everyone suffered a roller coaster of emotions. Growing up, I was aware that in order for us to live a fully charged life, we have to be physically fit. Many times forgetting about our mental fitness. Mental health was an elusive topic to me until last year when that changed my life. Now, here's the thing. You don't know what the story is. You don't want to know in what context is this individual talking to you. What happened in it? It's just a dialogue. It's a commentary, a very general, broad level commentary. And quite honestly, it doesn't impact the audience in any memorable way whatsoever. As a matter of fact, if the audience hears that concept of the speech, they're not going to have anything to tie it to and relate it to. That's the important thing with the story. They actually can tie the message to an experience that you've shared with them. Now, I just took this and this is my creativity on it, but let's just tell that same message in the story. This last year, I would start the day off feeling great. But by the time I listened to the news about the pandemic, I watched people driving alone with their mask on. I came to my office and waved at people 6 feet away from me. By the time I sat down at my desk, I was quasi-depressed. As a kid growing up on a Montana farm, I lived a fully charged, active life by being physically fit. When you're feeding cattle at 20 degrees below zero, there's no time for self-pity or depression. You get the job done. But being mentally fit was never, mentally fit was never as important to me as being physically fit until last year. Now, that was personally told. It was in a context that you could see why I was saying being physically fit was important, mentally fit wasn't. When I talked about a roller coaster of depression, I talked about getting up and going to feeling good, but listening to the news, watching people drive to work, going into a work environment. By the time I got down, I had come down that roller coaster. I told you about the roller coaster. I shared with you how I was high, how I was low, instead of saying I was on a roller coaster. Now, let me give you just one more example. I have here. This is another speech from a couple years ago. It's doing what you need to do one step at a time to bring out your gifts and achieve your dreams, no matter how tough things get. The school may not think you're talented. Your company may not think you're talented, but I know you're talented. You just keep working on your talents to achieve your dreams. Everyone fails, but you only really fail in life when you give up on your dreams. Just keep working no matter how hard it seems. You will achieve more than you ever dreamed. Okay, there's no context in that whatsoever. But let's turn around and put some context in that and tell a story with it and let the story carry the message to the audience. Again, I just made this up and I said, okay, how can we take that, make it into a story? When I was 10 years old, I used to lay in my backyard and watch airplanes fly across the sky. I wondered what it felt like to soar above the earth. As I laid there, I dreamed of someday piloting my own airplane. When I was 18, I applied for a scholarship at Valley Aviation College, but I failed the entrance exam. I wasn't accepted. As I drove back home, I was apathetic and I felt my dreams were only dreams. When I got home, my mom and my dad and my grandmother all met me at the front door for the good news. But I told them I didn't have any good news. That's when my little 5'2" grandmother looked at me and pulled me by the arm to the edge of the porch and looked at me and she said, "So, get to work." I said, "What?" She goes, "Get to work." "What do you mean?" She said, "Look at that car out there. Do you think somebody just sat down and built that car one time and it worked? No. They had to work at it. They built it the wrong way. They had mistakes, but they kept going until it worked. That airplane that flies in the air, you think somebody just built an airplane and it flew the first time? No, they had to work at it. They probably crashed several times and it didn't work until they finally figured out to work. So you're no different. Get to work." Okay. Now that comes across on Get to Work. The other is a narrated story. That's how I'm getting the message. It's in the story. The story delivers the message. This is something that took me a lot of work in speaking to really refine, but it is a point that moved my speaking from being below average to being above average. Let your story carry your message. Whenever you find yourself trying to explain your message or explain the story to the audience, stop right there. And a lot of times you just have to pull that out. You don't need it at all. But I swear this is an overriding compulsion on a lot of people's part. And I call it spoon feeding the audience. You get your spoon, you say, okay, now here's the meaning in the story. Eat your vegetables here. Okay, I'm going to spoon feed you what this actually means. The audience gets the story. They get it. They're not stupid. Tell them the story. Let the story carry the message. That's your tip for today. I wish you the best success in your speaking, and I'll see you next week.